So I was never actually good at skateboarding, or skiing, or BMXing, or any extreme sport for that matter. I was a gaming guy who played baseball, so don't get your hopes up. I may sound like I'm 6'8" and can deadlift 640 pounds, but I'm actually not. I know, major plot twist. But the point is, sports with boards involved are just not my field of expertise. In fact, the last time I went skiing, I broke my tibia and had to get a metal plate and some screws put into my leg on the night of New Year's Eve 2020. Start to a great year. In the 2000s when I was growing up, being involved in some form of extreme sport was the norm where I'm from. If you don't skate or ride BMX bikes, then you were scum of the earth, and you definitely couldn't hang out with the cool kids who smoked cigs in the middle school bathroom. And on top of that, I wanted to wear my Fox Racing shirt, and I couldn't be a poser. So I decided to learn more about the realm of skateboarding and snowboarding from Tony Hawk Pro Skater and SSX, which are, by the way, two of the sickest games on planet Earth. Don't at me. These types of games were the real deal, and if you were a boy growing up around the time when these were popular, you know what I'm talking about. Extreme sports games defined the early to mid 2000s, and seeing this introduction in a video game primed you for a great experience. Tony Hawk games, SSX, MX vs ATV, Skate, and Jet Set Radio were huge parts of my childhood, and they hold a special place in my heart even today. And that's the case for thousands of other people my age. These games defined a generation. But kids today don't really get to experience this. They're too busy buying cringe Fortnite TikTok dances to know how to bust a sick combo in Tony Hawk Underground, and they would rather play Roblox than jump cool-ass dirt bikes in MX vs ATV.
It's also a great exercise move.
As much as I want to joke about it, extreme sports games are few and far between these days, and big-budget AAA ones are pretty much entirely out of the picture. It seems like culture as a whole has changed, and the things that were in when I was younger are inevitably out in today's time. So today, I want to spend some time talking about the history and near disappearance of this genre of game. I want to raise the question of if these titles were really as good as we remember them, and if there's ever a chance for things like this to return to the limelight in the gaming industry. Let's talk about the extreme disappearance of extreme sports games. The origin of these types of games dates all the way back to 1986. This was a year when things liked to explode, like Chernobyl and the unfortunate name of Michael.
Michael here.
But these events were just forgettable specks in the history books, and they were overshadowed by something huge that took place in this year. The release of the one, the only, 720 Degrees. 720 Degrees was the first skateboarding game to ever hit the market. It came out in its most popular form as an arcade cabinet, but was also released for quite a few other consoles such as the NES and Commodore 64. This game was much different than the skateboarding games you may be familiar with today, and it was quite simplistic, but fun. You're a guy in your nice little suburban neighborhood, but you want to become a degenerate and be a true skater. So you skate around your neighborhood and are able to visit a few different skate parks. You better get there quick though, because if you don't, you get attacked by a swarm of killer bees. Then you have to ask your mom for more quarters to continue your game, and you definitely don't want to do that. This game screams late 1980s. But like I said, it was very simplistic, and the only tricks that you could really do were cool little spins and a few hand plants when in freestyle mode on the half pipe. It was bare bones, but due to the super cool theming and the fact that there was nothing else like it, 720 Degrees was the catalyst that started the skateboarding game trend as we know it. But there's more to extreme sports than just skateboarding, and someone decided to capitalize on that niche as well. Enter Winter Games and California Games. Both of these came out around the same time, and these games introduced skiing and snowboarding, figure skating, bobsledding, roller skating, surfing, BMXing, and even footbag. These three games were some of the most notable extreme sports games that came out around this time, but I gotta mention the first of the motocross games that came out as well, and this baby started all the way back in 1984, the year of Big Brother and the Thought Police. It was called Excite Bike, and it was pretty exciting, but we'll pause on this one because motocross games didn't get popular until later. Whoa, would you look at that, it's now the 1990s. Grunge skater boys are everywhere, and your goal in life is to look more homeless than your peers because the less you look like you tried, the cooler you really were. In 1995, the world received a blessing that it didn't realize it needed. The first ever X Games. Tied in with the grunge counterculture that was popular around this time, the X Games would set a precedent that really went on to define an era and the video game industry, with its improving... What the f***? That's a long-ass sentence. Tied in with Tied in with the grunge counterculture that was popular around this time, the X Games would set a precedent that really went on to define an entire era, and the video game industry, with its improving technology, would capitalize on this trend at the right time, making the genre what it is today. Is that a run-on sentence? This is when we would get games such as Cool Borders for the PS1, Motocross Madness for PC, 1080 snowboarding on the N64, and most importantly, Tony Hawk Pro Skater. The difference between these releases and the previous ones is that 1, the extreme sports culture was much bigger and more of a household name, and 2, the technology in the gaming industry improved drastically from previous releases, meaning that companies had the ability to do new things. The biggest example of this can be found in Tony Hawk Pro Skater in 1999. This was the first skateboarding game that had truly open levels and 3D graphics, and it started the arcade-style trick combo system that we're all familiar with today. The developers utilized this increase in technology to design worlds that complemented the new combo-focused gameplay. And that's the reason why it was such a successful game. It took all the things from previous skateboarding games, adding new layers of depth and new gameplay elements, and packaged it with one of the most popular athletes at the time. Not to mention, they added amazing, perfectly fitting music that also represented the culture that the game was marketing to. It was a recipe for success, and it worked. The success of Tony Hawk Pro Skater made game companies realize the potential in this explosive niche. This is when you began to see the real spike in these types of games, both on the spectrum of board sports and with things like motocross. In 2000s, we got Motocross Madness 2, ATV Off-Road Fury, SSX, Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2, and Jet Set Radio. And this was just the beginning of a very popular trend in gaming. Each and every developer was trying to outshine each other by releasing new, innovative, and exciting extreme sports games. There were surfing games and rollerblading games and extreme boat racing and snowcross and everything your extreme little heart could desire. The marketing budgets were through the roof, and the companies were churning out games like a 2020 Federal Reserve money printer. And from experience, we know what happens when companies decide to do that. Just take a look at nearly every game franchise that was popular in the last 15 years. Call of Duty, Assassin's Creed, Far Cry, Halo, Gears of War, the list goes on. We reached the phase of oversaturation and unimaginative ideas. But this phase wasn't without its good games. From 2000 to 2007, we had Tony Hawk Underground and Pro Skater 4, MX vs. ATV Unleashed, SSX Tricky, and some other games that were undoubtedly some of the best in their series. But good things can't last forever, and towards the end of this era is when things got a bit repetitive and stale. I'm not saying that every game that came out was bad, but they weren't selling as well, which has to mean something. In 2007, EA Black Box came out with something amazing, a more realistic, physics-based skateboarding game known as Skate. This was much different than everything that came out in the last 10 years, and people were raving about this game. In fact, as you probably already know, EA made 2 more games that followed it, and each of these were even more popular than their predecessors. They sold a ton of copies, and they were honestly some of my favorite games that I've ever played. But unfortunately, after the 3rd release in the Skate series in 2010, EA Black Box was disbanded, and the series went on a near indefinite hiatus. At the same time, the Tony Hawk series died out after a few terrible releases, SSX was no more, and MX vs. ATV was dying off after declining sales. Extreme sports games were on their last leg. This wasn't only from the oversaturation and constant uninspired and bad games, but also from a shift in culture as a whole. The grunge skater culture from the late 90s and early 2000s was no more, and kids were now either doing something entirely different or riding scooters instead of boards and bikes. Music changed, MTV went downhill, the iPod overtook CDs, Blockbuster was replaced by Netflix, and the 90s were wiped out of existence. People just weren't into extreme sports like they used to be, and the declining sales proved this even further. My generation has a special connection with these types of games because they were our childhood and it's what we played growing up. There was a lot of people like this, and because of the nostalgic appeal of these games, the genre may not fully be dead. It's dead in the market, yes, but not in the hearts of all the people who played these games. In fact, it actually seems like things are going in the right direction again. While yes, there aren't any AAA popular releases like Skate and Pro Skater had done back in the day, there are a lot of smaller projects being released that highlight the beauty of extreme sports games. I played Snow for quite a while, and it's a relatively good game. Session came out, and honestly I don't think a lot of people played it, but it has quite a bit of positive reviews. And we actually have Skate 4 on the horizon. It's probably a few years away, but EA did, finally after years of waiting, confirmed that they are now working on Skate 4. I don't think that these types of games will ever be as popular as they once were, but that's okay with me. People have changed and culture has changed, but my desire for extreme sports games has not. Even if I only get a few occasional good games, I'll take it. It's better than nothing, and I would rather play those over Assassin's Creed 70 or Far Cry 20. But I guess we'll have to see if Skate 4 shines a new light on a genre of games that kids today haven't really gotten to experience. Maybe this new game will mark the end of the disappearance of extreme sports games. Anyways guys, that's going to be it for today's video. What are your thoughts on extreme sports games? Which ones are your favorite and why? And how do you feel about Skate 4? Let me know in the comments below. I hope you all enjoyed, I will see you next time, and peace.